Hello, and welcome back to the Celestial Perch. Today I have a more for fun video, obviously, being a tier list. This one should be relatively quick though. Although I have all of the species up here, I have no plan on reviewing every single species. I'm going to be exclusively looking at the avian species. So, the species that starts here with the peacock, and I believe ends down here with the nice penguin. This is just more of a for fun video, kind of a brief break in between this and my next new player guide part 2, which will be going over the first 5-ish years of the game, going over systems and UI and other stuff like that. But without further ado, let's dive in and we'll briefly go over kind of the rating system in general, just so that it makes sense. I have this kind of on a to F, more of like a school traditional rating system as opposed to like the S, A, B, C, D, and then sometimes like E. This one is more of the traditional A to F, and I will be breaking it down into the one at the top. So if there's a species up at the top and a species down at the bottom, the top might be more of like an A plus, whereas the one at the bottom might be more of like an A minus. So let's get into it. Starting off with the peacock species. This one, my personal preference, I do enjoy it quite a bit. I've played with the peacock species quite a bit. I would say the only major downside to the peacock species is that you can't change enough on them. Other species, you can adjust their clothing. For the peacock species, regrettably, you cannot. So, maybe it'd be something like a B plus to A minus. For now, I'll keep it more in like the A minus tier. Next, we have these species. This one is pretty good, actually. Pretty bird-like. That's kind of one of my major requirements, just bird-like, of course. Has a nice beak. They can wear clothing. And like most of the other birds, they have a nice kind of coloring to them. Only thing is they do kind of have a little bit more of a flat face, and their in-game movements are not as kind of sleek as I would like. Moving on to this guy. This is kind of coincidental, but he's kind of middle of the pack for me. Kind of has a weird brow, you can kind of see there. But he has some nice feathers and a good beak, and he can wear clothes. Uh, not my favorite, not my least favorite. And, this guy, he meets like just enough of the avian look. He has a super weird face, though. Um, kind of unnerving to look at in game, but it it has its own merits. I would say the beak itself is weird. It could be good for like a devouring swarm or like fanatic purifier. Um, Beyond that, I have rarely used it. Moving on, this kind of worked out perfectly actually. It went straight from A to F. This is my first F tier bird. It hardly looks like a bird. It has these like weird little frills that are supposedly feathers. Um, very, very low tier bird in my mind. Looks more like a mammalian, or if it was blue, maybe even like an aquatic. It's sort of just low tier in every sense of low tier. Little to no redeeming factors, qualities here. I would pass up on this avian species. Not 10 times out of 10. Moving on. This guy's another D tier. He has a like similar like nice coloring to some of the higher tiers. His face is just kind of weird. Fits more in with like the D tier of, could be used as like a fanatic purifier, but not much beyond it. Um Overall, okay. Moving on to the bird wearing the headgear. This guy is really unique. The headgear really separates him out. He can wear clothing, pretty nice coloring, and very, very bird-like. Has a beak, has feathers, overall looks cool and is pretty unique. In my mind, he's a pretty easy B tier. Maybe even above those guys. For now, I'll keep him below. Moving on, we have these birds. These birds also pretty cool, I would say. They have kind of like these like nice little mustaches and brows. I maybe even put him above this guy, for now at least. Has some good coloring, can wear clothes, and very clear avian features. Oh boy. This guy's pretty grotesque. If you're ever role playing and you want something to use the repugnant trait on, here's your species. It's like a weird naked chicken. I I can't really like it too much. It I mean, it's maybe better than this guy because it at least has a beak. So I'll give it that. It is still very, very gross looking. The next species, pretty easy A tier here. A plus tier, easily my favorite species within Stellaris. Just look at that coloring and that beak, and some glorious feathers as well. Even his clothing can look very avian. Solid A plus tier. Best species in Stellaris, hands down. This guy, he's okay. Has a beak. Looks more like a dinosaur. I maybe would put him up into C tier, actually. It has kind of a cool dinosaur aesthetic. Could work for a lot of empires. Maybe not something like a materialist. But yeah, it has some intermediate use for species. Could go either way. Looks okay. Probably more in like the C tier. Moving on, we will look at this guy. I would say another kind of D tier-ish civ. Another D tier-ish avian species. Overall, just kind of spooky looking. Fits really well in with the other kind of D tier fanatic purifier look. Just very aggressive look. Moving on. This one is very ugly. I don't think it's hard to tell which one's worse of the three. He has a weird mohawk. He does have feathers that like look a little bit more like feathers. Maybe I'll put him more of like middle of the pack. But his face is just very wrong looking, in my opinion. Just not a very good species. Moving on. Probably another B tier bird up here. Very bird-like, lots of feathers. Kind of unfortunately, the only thing that's a downside of this guy is a weirdish beak. Not my personal favorite, but does have some good color scheme, and overall, a nice-looking species. Moving on to this guy. He's somewhere maybe between C and D. I'd maybe put him at like the top of D, maybe even the bottom of C, depending on how it looks. But overall, he's not my favorite. He kind of just has a weirdish face, and I feel like if he was just a bit shorter, we can maybe see a bit more of his kind of feather headdress here, which would make him a little bit higher on the species list. Now, moving on. These guys are pretty good, actually. They're one of the like third or fourth species I ever used for an empire. They are definitely kind of more within like the dinosaur look, but they can wear clothes. So it's dinosaur with clothes, which is pretty cool. Dinosaur bird with clothes. Overall, low B, maybe even C+, but still a pretty okay looking species. This guy, you look at him and he looks like a plantoid. You legitimately forget that he's an avian. Easy F-. Hard to notice that he's a bird. You would put that next to anyone in the A and B tier and say, which one's a bird, which one's a plant? 100% of the time you're picking this guy as the plant. You would be sorely mistaken to think it's a bird. Now, moving on, I think we have our third and final A tier, the penguin species. The penguin species is unique. It's very bird-like, works perfectly for frozen worlds, has good clothing sets, good coloring, and all in all, just a very, very solid. I might even put the penguin above the peacock guy. The peacock guy, the lack of clothes, I actually might even bump him down to like B tier and bump. I mean, no, I think I'll keep him at A minus, a very low A minus, but still, nonetheless, an A plus or an A minus bird, somewhere within the A tier. I believe that should be it for all of the birds. Just going over it one last time, I don't see anything that I wholeheartedly disagree with, at least like from my initial impression. Um, just in terms of, maybe I'll even put this guy down here. It's hard to say. Like, he doesn't have clothes, but he looks more like a bird than these three. It's like of these four, which one would you look at and think bird? Probably this one. So I guess just by default he has to be kind of top of F tier, even though he's missing clothes and looks kind of weird. And in fact, I might even bump this guy up to C, just because he does have good clothing sets. He does have pretty good coloring. He does at least kind of have a beak. And he's not as grotesque or repugnant as some of the others in like D tier, and nowhere near as bad as some of the others in F tier. But he's also not as pretty as the other birds. Just more of like a middle of the pack bird. The only one that's maybe kind of like a possible switch here would be this one and this one up in high C. Those are probably the most flexible in my opinion. But overall, as a Stellaris player with over 1,000 hours and someone who has put a lot of time into playing birds specifically, this is kind of my go-to. I will usually pick an avian species over another. There are a few that I use that are not avian, but still, this is kind of where I stand for the avian species within Stellaris. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this for fun video, but have a blessed day.